Hello and welcome to the Paid Search Podcast. My name is Chris, and today we are getting started in Google Ads, specifically next steps. So this is a continuation of last week's discussion where I went through several items about how to start a basic campaign, something that is very approachable, easy, should be something that you can put together very quickly and get started without a whole lot of research and stress and things to worry about. So now let's get into how do you optimize the campaign? How do you improve the campaign? What do you do once you start getting the data in the account, and where do you go from there? So I appreciate you guys listening. I'm recording from Colorado at the moment, so hopefully the audio is going to come out good. I definitely know that it's annoying to listen to a podcast with bad audio, so I've taken some time to make sure that the audio is going to come out as good as I can get it, but I appreciate your understanding. I can still deliver the content even on location from the mountains, so I'm dodging the Texas heat for the summer for a little while here. All right, so let's go into it. This is going to be another abbreviated episode, but still going to be packed full of information. So I'm going to get into the next steps of getting started in Google Ads. But first, I want to remind you about optio.com/PSP. Now, they are an ever-evolving company coming out with new ways for you to get more out of your Google Ads. If you're listening to this podcast, you are their target market because they are interested in building a tool that helps Google Ads managers, freelancers, agencies, or just those business owners that just want more out of their Google Ads. They don't know how to make the best analytical decisions, and you don't. And that's what Optio does. It helps you make better analytical decisions about your Google Ads. Get more done with optio.com/PSP. Get a 2-month free trial with this amazing software that is continuing to grow and change as the Google Ads tool always continues to change on us. So it's important that you stay ahead of the curve. That is optio.com, opteo.com/PSP. Okay, so let's get into it. Just as a brief review from last week, I talked about some of the things that are important, like making sure you only have 1 or 2 ad groups, making sure you just put 5 keywords in those ad groups, making sure you start with phrase match, no broad match, not even exact match, just real simple, and write an ad. I talked about how to write those ads, use max clicks, small budget, and then watch your search terms. Make sure you're not getting junk search terms. So those were the 10 items, and I'm going to follow up with the next 10 steps on improving, optimizing your campaign, making sure you're not wasting money. Now, if you listen to this podcast much, you know I am not a get rich quick kind of podcast. I'm not talking about making millions in your first month. That's absolutely ridiculous. Those people are scamming you. They're lying to you. We're talking practical, okay? So the first practical thing that you need to work on in Google Ads is just making sure you're getting the right traffic, okay? So episode 420, which was last week, talked about making sure that you set it up and got started in the right way. Episode 421, this one, is going to be talking about how to avoid those stumbling blocks, okay? And the very first thing, you've been running this for a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, you're wondering, how do I optimize? How do I make sure I'm not wasting money? The first thing that you want to try and spot is overspending keywords. What I mean by that are keywords that are consuming, if you set the budget to the last 7 days, the last 14 days, keywords that are consuming 50% or more of the entire campaign. Okay, so all of the spend on the entire campaign. So you have 2 ad groups, maybe 1 ad group, and there's 1 keyword you've maybe spent $500 on it, and everything else combined has spent $1,000. That is what I'm talking about. I want you to try and find those overspending keywords, and they need to be, essentially they're creating a monopoly, okay? They're monopolizing too much of the spend, and you need to rush in there like the federal government and just break that thing up, okay? It's consuming too much. It's overtaking the rest of the keywords, and no single keyword at this point in your Google Ads process should be consuming 50%, 60%, certainly not 70, 80, 90. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So here's why that's wrong. The reason it's wrong is because these keywords should be segmented and very specific to a certain type of traffic quality. And it's likely if there's one overspending keyword, it probably has a ton of different search terms coming through that one keyword. Okay, so that's important because if there's one keyword that's getting a ton of different search terms, it is not specifically getting traffic according to what it is prescribed to do. So if you have one keyword, let's say it's a phrase match keyword, and because this is just top of mind for me, let's say you sell hiking gear, okay? Your phrase match keyword that might be spending 70% of the budget out there might be phrase match hiking gear. Then you have a whole lot of other stuff around, different segmentations of that, but everything seems to be flowing through just the one keyword, hiking gear. Okay? That's a problem because hiking gear is too general. You're going to spend a ton of money on terms that are about hiking gear, kind of, people looking for other brands, boots and shirts and backpacks and all this kind of stuff. That is not what you want to test. What you want to test is which of these different smaller segmentations work better. So in that instance, when you find that overspending keyword, you need to go in there and split it up. That might mean pausing that keyword entirely. That might mean checking to see what search terms are coming through and multiplying that keyword, saying, okay, I need hiking gear clothing, hiking gear shoes, hiking gear backpacks, add words to it. Essentially, you take that overspending keyword and add additional terms to it. That might mean that you need new ad groups, but if that's the case, it might be worth it if you discover that it's important. So that's what you want to try and do. Find those overspending keywords. If everything is pretty even and your top keyword's only spending maybe 20% of the budget, okay, that's probably fine. But that's going to be your first hill to conquer. There is those overspending keywords. Now, once you've eliminated that possibility, the next thing is you need to check what type of traffic each keyword is getting. Now, this is what's called doing a search report by keyword. It's really easy to do. Go to your keyword, your search keywords section, and click the checkbox next to one of your keywords. Not multiple, just one. Click the checkbox next to one keyword. And then in the blue bar, which will be in the middle of your screen, click the word search terms. It'll pop up. As soon as you hit the checkbox next to a keyword, a blue bar will pop up. You click search terms. This is important because what this does is it shows you what traffic is coming through individual keywords. Now, this isn't something that you need to do every day, probably not every week, because you're already checking search terms, but this segmentation by individual keywords is probably something that you might want to do once a month, at least some of your top keywords. Make sure your higher spending keywords are not reaching past what is an acceptable quality of traffic. You don't want keywords that are overreaching and getting really really unqualified or really broad or super specific traffic that should be going somewhere else. Okay. If you find certain things that are unqualified, outright, you're saying how forget trying to understand why a certain keyword is getting a certain type of traffic. That's only Google knows. You might look at a certain phrase match keyword and say, how in the world did this show up? Backpack hiking gear. How did that get best hiking shoes to buy? That's the struggle with Google Ads, is controlling these outrageous matches where you're like, that's not even the same universe of what I'm going after here. But that's what it's going to get. So once you find areas that are straying beyond what's an acceptable level for that keyword, you need to start finding negative keywords. And that's point number 3. You need to start adding negative keywords. So you should have some data over the past few weeks, past month, and by looking at individual keywords, search terms, you might find that, oh wow, this one keyword is driving a ton of traffic, right in this one little area. And if I add an ad group negative keyword here, that would stop it and force it to go into this other ad group. Okay. Now, use this very cautiously. I don't want you to overuse ad group negatives. Do not think that this is a license to add ad group negatives so that you're funneling traffic, every other ad group you add the negative keywords to block it from all the other ad groups. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that's important. Maybe your hiking gear keyword keeps getting the word backpack in it, but you have a backpack ad group. So you just add the word broad match, ad group negative, backpack as a negative ad group, an ad group negative keyword. That will help you to funnel the traffic to the appropriate ad group if that's happening. If it's happening very, very little, not something I would be overly concerned about. Okay? So adding negative keywords should be part of your ongoing process. And checking individual keywords should be maybe a monthly, maybe every 2 months, something like that. Now, let's talk about pausing keywords. And I'll tell you, I find 2 groups of people in Google Ads. I find people that tend to pause too often, and people that can't ever let go of their keywords and never pause. Okay? If you followed my advice from last episode, then what you're doing is you're running max clicks. So typically I would tell you to lower your bids on individual keywords, but that's not an option. So what I want you to do is to find keywords. Perhaps you can't add enough negative keywords. Perhaps they're this keyword is overspending. You can't add negatives. You can't really multiply it. You can't create multiple versions of that keyword because it's just kind of everywhere. That is point number 4. In that case, stop the keyword entirely. Do not let that keyword spend anymore. If you can't slow it down, if you can't break it up, if you can't do something to slow the roll of that keyword, pause the keyword. It's gone. It's done. It's got to stop spending. It's very important. Okay, so I think moderation on something like this is very important. I think pausing too many keywords can lead you to a common problem where you end up with less and less keywords. I think pausing keywords without replacing them leads to a definite degradation of the ad group, of the entire account. The less and less keywords mean you have less and less lines in the water. You're fishing for clicks here. And you go down the line, slowly pausing keywords, you're pulling those lines out of the water. That's less opportunity for Google to get you traffic. There is a point when now you have just too few keywords and you just can't get the traffic. You can't get the diversity of traffic like you used to. So this is critically important that you don't use number 4, pausing keywords, too often. I don't want you to do it too much, but you should do it some when it can't be broken up, when it can't be when negative keywords can't be applied to slow it down, and then we know also because you're using max clicks, the bids can't be adjusted. Okay, so that's number 4. Number 5, and this is something that is probably more relevant after the first month or so, maybe 2 months. I want you to check your ad copy. Okay, and you say, well, Chris, that's useless. I can't see what my ads look like. Now we're using responsive search ads, and I can't see the headlines. I can't see the click-through rate for all the different variations. You're right. But you can see the combinations that Google's using and the frequency at which that it's using them. So what I want you to do is go to the Ad tab, the Ads, plural, Ads tab. Click on View Asset Details on one of your ads. And then up at the top, there's a Combinations tab that you can click on. This will show you for month of July, month of June, month of May, whatever. You can see which ad copy is rotated the most frequently. So this is important because, like you heard in the last episode, you're going to have at least 6 headlines and at least 2 descriptions. If one of those 6 headlines is being rotated too much and it looks crappy, it doesn't look like it's giving context about what you're selling, it's giving the wrong message. If you don't think that that's relevant enough for a new customer to see your ad and click on it with a full understanding of what they are clicking on, get rid of that headline. Replace it with something else. Better yet, replace it with 2 other headlines. This is irregardless of your click-through rate. Do not fall under the assumption that, hey, I have a great click-through rate, so my ad copy is excellent. That is not true. I can artificially engineer great click-through rates by doing one simple trick. This sounds like I'm hooking you to something, like I'm about to pitch you some kind of special software. I'm not. This is 100% true. I can change the click-through rate of any ad copy with one simple trick. I can put the word free in there somewhere, right? I can put some kind of value given at less dollars. I could put 50% off. I could put 90% off if I'm doing e-commerce. It may not be true, but you know what it'll do? It'll raise that click-through rate. And that may not be the message I want to convey, especially if it's not true. Okay, so it's important that you consider your ad copy in the context of how people are reading it, what they're searching for, and what you're saying when they click on it. So check your ad copy. Make sure you're not representing the wrong thing. And if you think you are, replace it. Get rid of that headline. Try something different. This is you're beginning your optimization process here. Change must happen for optimization. All right, next, I want you to check your click type segmentation. That sounds complicated. You may not even know what I just said. Like, what the heck is that, Chris? But it's really simple. Go to your campaign view and click this segmentation button over on the right-hand side of the campaign view. There will be lots of things in this segmentation window, from clicks to date and time, and one of them will say click type. Choose that option and pay attention to what you see. Set it to the last 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, however long is a relevant time for you, and check and see how many clicks are going on the headline versus site links versus get directions versus the call extension. You may have done some of these things. I didn't mention any of these in my last session with you guys. I didn't talk about this in the getting started first discussion. But if you do have these, it's important to check your click type, because you might be sending traffic. You might be sending 50% of the traffic to some site links. And those site links might be horrible. They might have really bad content, and that's where you're spending all your money. You have all these carefully crafted ad copy, keywords, negative keywords. You've done so much work only for them to land on a About Us page, which has a picture of you and your family saying, thanks for choosing us. There's no call to action. There's no context about you being a plumber or anything. I mean, it's just a horrible, horrible page to have people land on. They immediately bounce. So check your click type, and if there's a problem there, fix it. If that means deleting site links, if that means possibly deleting the call asset, you might need to do that. I do it all the time. Call assets, site links sometimes can pull away from where I actually want people to go. So it's important. All right, next, this one's a little bigger. This is number 7. Number 7 is new ad groups. Now, if you didn't find anything, as I talked about in the first couple bullet points before about search terms, checking your search terms and multiplying keywords that are overspending, stuff like that, you might need to consider adding new ad groups. Now, here's where you have finally started to understand how Google reacts to keywords, what your bids are. And now's the time to start multiplying the number of ad groups that you have. Add them one at a time, maybe 2 at a time, maybe 1 a month, maybe 1 every 2 weeks. You don't need to blow this up. You don't need to add a ton. Do not add 15. These need to be thoughtfully built with ad copy that matches the intent of the keywords, with the appropriate page from the ad and the keywords. Okay, so new ad groups. I won't go through how to do that. I think it's fairly obvious. I went through, that kind of thing in the first episode here in this series. So we'll move on to number 8. Number 8's a little complicated, so I'm not going to really be able to dive into this. I have other episodes where I do a much deeper dive into search impression share, but number 8 is just that, search impression share. So I'm just going to give you one rule to check for. Again, this is just the basics, getting started, next steps. Okay, so there's a whole lot more I could share, but this is one thing that you should be concerned about. If you see 20%, 15%, less than 10% search impression share, and this is controversial, some people may disagree with me here, but I think you should strongly consider doing point number 9, which point number 9 is shrinking your targeting. Okay, so I broke this into 2 different points, because the first is check your search impression share. If it's 50%, 70%, 80%, it's probably not going to be. Max Clicks is never really going to give you 80% or higher, but if it's very small, if it's a very small percentage, then you need to consider number 9, which is shrinking your targeting. Now, Chris, if you're saying, Chris, I don't understand what is a search impression share, go to your columns. It's under the competitive metrics tab, and just look at one. It's called search IMPR dot share. Search imper, I guess is IMPR share. Search impression share. And it'll have a percentage. Okay, check that for the past 7 days, 14 days, maybe, something like that. And if it is 15%, 20%, 25%, then you are a candidate for point number 9. You need to possibly shrink your keywords. And I don't mean pausing. I mean adding keywords that are more specific. Maybe your keywords are too broad. Hiking gear is too broad. It's getting way too much traffic. And its scope is too wide. You need to be more specific. If those are already as specific as you can be, then next, maybe you need to shrink your geographic targeting. Maybe you don't need to be national. Maybe you need to be regional. Maybe you need to be a few states, a few larger cities, one large city. Maybe your radius is too wide. Try shrinking that. Possibly shrink your ad schedule. You may not want to show 24/7. Maybe you want to show during business hours, weekdays, only on the weekends. Okay, I don't suggest you do all of these. Maybe try one and see what happens, right? This is just next steps, right? Steps, plural. You're gonna make a lot of steps here. And then last, and this one's a bit more risky, but potentially change match types. Maybe try a few exact match keywords. That will also help improve your search impression share. Okay? And the last one is very important. I want to make sure you get this one real quick. I want to remind you, opteo.com/PSP. I am taking time from my hiking vacation in Colorado here to do this podcast. And if you at all feel thankful for this and appreciate this content, maybe you already tried Opteo. Just drop Opteo a comment on Facebook, Twitter, somewhere. Just tell them, hey, thanks for supporting Chris because he supports me. Let them know that you appreciate it, even if you don't sign up. That's not something they asked me to do, but that helps communicate to them that people are listening, even though maybe they're not seeing signups. Maybe you guys have heard my Opteo speech many times, but I appreciate you guys doing that. Last one, rounding it off with something that will move us into the third episode of this series. It'll move us into an area where we can do a deeper level of optimization. And you're going to need conversion tracking. If you haven't considered conversion tracking, now is the time. This is step number 10 of the next steps getting started. That's conversion tracking. Now, if you have a call asset assigned, you may already be getting some conversions. You may have some conversion tracking set up, but you need to make sure that it's correct, and you need to track as many actions on your website as possible. That's important because maybe you track forms on your website. Maybe you track bookings or registrations, account creations, purchases, something like that. But you don't track phone calls, or you don't track, other contact us forms. You need to make sure you're tracking things that really matter to your business. If someone can call you, and that sometimes can be very, very valuable for you, and you get maybe 40% calls and 60% web forms, you're missing 40% of the data if you're only tracking web forms and not phone calls. So it's important that you get conversion tracking set up. There is no way that I could show you how to do that in a session like this. So it's even difficult to do it in a consulting session like I do, simply because there's a lot of web development code stuff that is involved, and everybody has different websites. So find someone that can help you with that. If you can't do it yourself, get that set up. If it needs to happen through Google Analytics, great, do it through Google Analytics. If you can manually put the code in on your thank you page for your purchase, or your contact form, or your booking page, or sign up page, or whatever, lead form, do it that way. But 2 things: get it done, and make sure it's done correctly, and that you're doing it for all 3: phone calls, web forms, booking. Not just phone calls. If you have 4 different ways that people contact you, they have contact form, booking, a chat, and a phone call. Do all 4. If you just have one, just track that one, but only for things that matter to your business. If this is a legit lead method for people to come through on your site, you need to track it. Okay, there are call tracking systems out there that you can use, that you can pay for. That's what I recommend. I don't recommend the Google free call tracking system that they have set up. Not a good system. Do not recommend it. I recommend a paid call tracking system. There's lots of them out there. You can find some that work directly with Google Ads. And that is it. You are now on your way to the next steps. And I usually pitch my services, but I'm not going to do that because I'm not really taking clients right now. I am only really taking the time to just continue this series, and I appreciate you guys being a part of the podcast. If you appreciate it, you can leave a review, you can subscribe, whatever you feel you want it to do. I appreciate any feedback. You can find me on Twitter, Paid Search Pod on Twitter. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys